So when margins dip, most owners blame pricing, competition, or seasonality, but the real answer is almost always inside the project management department. And so I'm going to show you the one visual that reveals whether your PMs are protecting margin or slowly eroding it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a chart and create a heat map. And what we're going to show is what was the actual margin versus the planned, and then you have revenue, and then have a target. So that orange line is a target line. And this gives you, sort of a 30,000 foot view. But then if you get more granular based off of PM, then you can start to see, where some leakage is. And also, once you learn how to do this, you can slice and dice things multiple ways, maybe not by month, but by job type, by residential, by commercial, all that stuff. And so let's get started. So we have a data set here, pretty basic data set. If you want this, there's a link to download it. You don't, I have several HVAC clients, and so like you don't need something this in depth. It's just I just make it as in depth and as realistic as I can. And so you're gonna have a lot of extra information here that you don't really need, but just so you can, just so you know what's possible. And so here you have a start date, which is what you're going to need. And then you have a PM. You could have a crew ID, but crews change over time, and so it's not as useful. I just put it there. System type, job type, residential versus commercial. And then you have things like, how long should this take? How long did permitting take? Things like that. And then here is where it gets sort of interesting. You have, total revenue, and then you have planned cost, planned profit, planned, percentage of the gross margin, and then actual cost at the material level, actual labor, actual other, actual total. And then all we have to do is calculate these three columns here. And so to get the end of the month, you use the EO month function. EO month off the start date, comma 0. And then this is the month here, the end of the month here. And then the actual gross profit is really straightforward. It's just revenue minus cost. So equals total revenue minus actual total costs. And you can see these numbers match these numbers. And then the percentage is just gross profit divided by revenue, right? Equals this divided by total revenue. Because this right here at the row level answers the question of the KPI, gross margin per project percentage. And this is gross margin per project. But to get further insights, what we can do is we can break this down by month, by year, and by planned projected versus actual and stuff like that. So the first thing we want is we want a unique list of the months that we just created. So equals unique in the table, and we have the month. So if you're not familiar with tables, because I have everything on the data tab in a table, I don't need to go back and forth because I know the columns. And so you can just do that, and it just saves a little bit of time. Okay, so the next thing we need is we need the actual versus plan versus revenue versus, and then we want a target. So I'm just going to copy and paste just to, again, save a couple seconds. So the actual gross margin, let's just go back into the data. I'll go in here one more time because I won't need to anymore. But actual gross profit is the actual gross margin, right? So that's the number we need versus the planned. And we're going to divide both of these by revenue. So what we want to do is we want to sum from the table the actual gross profit here, comma, and we want to do it where the month is here. And so we get this number, which is good, but we want a percentage here, but this is just a good start. And then what I'll show you is with this formula, the benefit of the table is that we can just copy that formula, and then we can just change some of these, and now we want planned gross profit. And so we have that here. And then again, the same thing, we can paste that, and instead of actual gross profit, just type in revenue. And then we have that. But this doesn't tell us exactly what we're wanting. So what we want is we want this number divided by revenue. So it's going to be this divided by this. And then Control Shift 5 to make it a percentage. And then this same thing divided by this. And then again, percentage, I'm going to press Control-Shift-4 to make this $1. And then here, I'm just going to highlight this and then drag it, and, double click to take it down. And then here, I want a plan percentage. Let's just say it's 30% equals that. And the reason I want it to equal is because if I change this, everything changes, and it'll be better for our target line. Okay, so to make the chart, I want to highlight these three, and then I want to hold down Control and highlight this, and then go to Home, Home or Insert, Recommended Charts, and then All Charts, and then Combo Chart, and then for the Plan GM and the Target GM, I want line, just like that. And one thing we could do, just to make it look a little bit easier to read, is we can change the axes. If you, instead of doing 0 to 45, we could do, say, 20 to 45. Right? And so you see a little more variation this way. But essentially what this is saying is actual was always below planned. But the real question is, are we meeting the target? And maybe the target's 30%. And you can see if the blue columns are above the line, the green line, then we are. But I'm going to double click on that line, go to here to change the color, maybe make it a little bit thinner. We just want to see it. It's taking up too much real estate here. And then now you can see, like, because this is, the blue column below the red line, like, is that good or bad? And on the surface, it's just, you're not planning in enough expenses, essentially. But the real question is, like, are we meeting the target, month over month? And this is saying, yes, we are. So for the heat map, I'm going to copy and paste the dates. And then I'm going to get a unique list of the PM, the project manager. So we have that here. I'm going to sort this alphabetically, and then I'm going to transpose this across the row. And then copy and paste. Okay, so to get the gross margin by month, because we have this column here, all we have to do is sum this based off of the month and based off the PM name and divide it by the revenue based off the month and based off the PM name. And I'll show you what I mean. So we want to sum if. So the first thing we want to do is we want to sum the actual gross profit, comma, where the PM is Eric, comma, and the month is here. So that's good. That's the GP attributed to Eric for the month, but we're going to divide that by revenue. So instead of doing the whole formula again, I can just copy it and then divide by, and then paste and do this at revenue, just like that. And now we have the percentages. And I just want to lock this real quick, meaning if I drag this down, you can see Eric is coming down with it, and I don't want that. That's called relative references in Excel. So I want to make sure I lock things. So wherever you see the row that you don't want to change, that as you go down, you don't want it to change, put the $sign before the number and after the letter. But for the column, for as you drag it down, you do want it to change, but as you drag it over, you don't want it to change, then you can put the $sign before the letter. So here, so I'm going to copy and paste. I'm not going to drag it over because it's a table. You're still going to have that issue. So just copy and paste it over. And then finally, say I want anything below 33%, I want to highlight it red. So highlight that, go to Home, Conditional Formatting, highlight cells less than this. And so now you have a dynamic changing cell, right? And you can just sort of see the lowest values. And then the last thing I want to show is if I want to put, say, the word target, just so your team knows what that is, everything breaks. And the reason is because now it's being stored as text. And so I want it to be stored as a percentage, but have the text of target there. So go back into the cell, press Control-1 for format cells, hit the dialog box, go to custom, and just do 0% if you want. That's not going to have any decimals. If you want decimals, then you can do, if you want 2 decimals, choose that one. If you want 1, choose that one. But we won't do that. We'll just have, I guess, whole percentages. And then now to calculate as you want. But yeah, so what this is going to answer, right, is this is just, how far off are we? And then also it's going to tell us our actual margin by month, and then it's going to show us who our worst performers, not necessarily at the PM level, but at the month level. And you can see, during the summer months, at least here in Texas, maybe higher margin, and then for whatever reason, Eric in August, didn't, like, maybe misquoted projects, or gave discounts or other things. And so there's a lot more you need to sort of dive in, but now you can sort of see on the surface, like, okay, this is worth looking into. But anyways, that's all I got for this one. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email, questions@databoards.io. If you want this data set, just let me know as well. There's a link to download it, but if you can't find it, let me know. And also, if you need some help structuring your data in a usable way, then shoot me an email, or there's a link to my calendar. But now that you know how to do this, you can slice on any of these. It's just, if you don't want to do it by date, but you want to do it by PM and system type, you can. You would just take the unique of this, right, put it here, and then do the same formula, but instead of using the month column, you would use the part column. And so, yeah, anyways, if you have any questions, again, let me know. And if not, I will see you in future videos.